In 1950, Chicago had 3.6 million people. It was the second largest city in America. By 1980, hundreds of thousands of those people had vanished. The city did not shrink because of a war. It did not shrink because of a sickness. The city shrank because of choices made by people with power. You need to understand what happened to Chicago. This story is not just about one city, it is a warning about how great places fall apart. The decline of Chicago is a story about money, fear, and lies. People in power told everyone the city was fine. The truth was very different. Underneath the shiny skyscrapers, a quiet disaster was happening. Money was leaving, people were running, streets turned dangerous. Leaders made bad deals to hide the problems. Soon, the bill for those bad deals came due. The result changed the city forever. Why did so many people leave Chicago in the 1970s? The census data shows a clear pattern. From 1970 to 1980, Chicago lost over 300,000 residents. This was the largest drop in the city's history. People did not leave at random. The people who left were mostly white families who lived on the edges of the city. They moved to places called the suburbs. On the same streets where people were leaving, the government was building new roads. The government paid for these roads with tax money. The roads made it very easy to drive out of the city. At the same time, black families living inside the city were blocked from moving to those new suburbs. Banks refused to give loans to black families. This unfair rule was called redlining. The federal government made redlining illegal in 1968, but the banks ignored the new law. White families got help to leave, black families were forced to stay. The city government secretly helped the white families leave. A practice called blockbusting made rich people richer. Real estate agents scared white homeowners. The agents told the white homeowners that black people were moving into the neighborhood. The agents lied. They said the property values would drop to zero. The white homeowners got scared. They sold their houses for very little money. The agents then sold those exact same houses to black families for much more money. The agents kept the extra money. The city leaders watched this happen. The city leaders did nothing to stop it. Neighborhoods changed color in just a few months. Entire communities lost all their savings. Where did the jobs go when the people left? For decades, the Sears Tower was the tallest building in the world. It opened in 1973. The Sears Company built it in downtown Chicago. People thought Sears would rule the city forever. But in 1974, Sears started to fail. The company lost money for the first time in its history. While Sears lost money, other companies in Chicago made record profits. The Chicago Board of Trade was very busy. Farmers and bankers traded millions of dollars worth of grain and cattle every day. The downtown financial district was very rich. The men in downtown Chicago wore expensive suits. They ate at fancy restaurants. But the companies that hired factory workers moved away. The factory workers wore dirty uniforms. They lost their paychecks. The rich got richer. The poor got poorer. The biggest companies did not just leave the city, they left the state. In 1970, Motorola moved its headquarters out of Chicago. They moved to a suburb. In 1973, Sears started moving thousands of office jobs out of the Sears Tower. They moved the jobs to Schaumburg. Schaumburg was a suburb with no city taxes. In 1979, International Harvester laid off 5,000 workers in Chicago. In 1980, the Wisconsin steel plant closed. That plant lost 3,500 jobs in one single day. The jobs left the neighborhoods that needed them most. The people who stayed in the city had no work. What happens to a city when the jobs disappear? In the 1970s, street gangs in Chicago changed. In the past, street gangs just fought over street corners. In the 1970s, street gangs became organized businesses. Two gangs grew very large. They were the gangster disciples and the vice lords. A man named Larry Hoover led the gangster disciples. He ran the gang from inside a prison cell. The Chicago Police Department had a lot of money. In 1977, the police department had over 13,000 officers. They drove fast cars. They carried heavy guns. They had helicopters. But the gangs had something much stronger. The gangs had the trust of the young people in the poor neighborhoods. The police were seen as an invading army. The gangs were seen as family. The police could not get witnesses to talk. The gangs controlled the streets. The city leaders knew the gangs were taking over. In 1981, Mayor Jane Byrne found out how bad it was. She learned that the gangster disciples were completely running a public housing project called Cabrini Green. Cabrini Green was right next to the rich downtown area. The gang leaders collected rent money from the residents. They decided who could walk on the sidewalks. They sold drugs in the open. The police were too scared to go inside the buildings. The mayor of the city had lost control of her own streets. How did Chicago hide its massive debt in the 1970s? The city needed money to pay for the police and the fire department, but the tax base was shrinking because people and businesses left. The city used a trick to get money. The city sold bonds. Bonds are paper promises. The city promised to pay back the money later with interest. Other cities in America were going bankrupt during this time. New York City almost went broke in 1975. New York had to ask the federal government for a loan. Chicago looked strong on paper. The banks gave Chicago good credit ratings. The banks thought Chicago was safe. But the city leaders were lying about their true costs. The city was spending much more money than it was taking in. In 1977, a judge looked at the city books. He found a terrible secret. He found out the city owed millions of dollars to the teachers' pension fund. The city had skipped payments for years. The teachers had been working for years with no retirement money saved. The city leaders had stolen from the future to pay for the present. The city owed money to the firefighters, too. The city owed money to the police. The debt was hidden in different accounting books. The city was legally broke. The population kept dropping. The jobs kept leaving. The gangs kept growing. The debt kept getting bigger. The city had less tax money every year. But the city leaders did not spend less money. They spent more money to hide the failure. Mayor Richard J. Daley died in December 1976. He had been the mayor for 21 years. He held all the power. When he died, the city fell into confusion. The next mayor was Michael Bilandic. Bilandic tried to fix the hidden debt. He failed. He made a terrible mistake with the weather. In January 1979, a huge snowstorm hit Chicago. 20 inches of snow fell on the city. The city did not plow the side streets. The trains broke down. The buses got stuck. The people in the neighborhoods could not go to work. They could not buy food. The rich downtown area was cleared quickly. The poor neighborhoods were frozen for weeks. The people were very angry. In 1979, Jane Byrne became mayor. She was the first woman to lead Chicago. She beat Bilandic in the election because of the snowstorm. She promised to fix the streets. She promised to stop the gangs. She decided to make a big public show of her power. In 1981, Mayor Byrne moved her furniture into an apartment in Cabrini Green. She moved into the gang-controlled housing project. The news cameras followed her. She stayed for a few weeks. It looked like a brave victory on television, but it was a trick. The city was still out of money. The gangs did not leave. They just moved their operations to other buildings while the cameras were there. The financial traders downtown made millions of dollars in 1981. The factory workers in the neighborhoods lost their homes. The city was split in two. One half was rich and safe. The other half was poor and dangerous. The mayor's publicity trick could not fix the math. You cannot fake money. You cannot fake jobs. Burn could not stop the decline. The debt grew larger. The banks started to worry about Chicago. In 1981, the city had to borrow money just to pay its daily bills. The great city of Chicago was broke. But this was only the beginning of the money problems. The true scale of the debt was still a secret from most of the public. The fight over that secret would tear the city apart in the next decade. A new mayor would take office soon. His name was Harold Washington. The city was not ready for the fight he would bring. The year 1983 brought a major change to Chicago. Harold Washington won the election for mayor on April 12, 1983. He was the first black mayor in the history of the city. The people voted for him because they wanted change. They wanted the city to fix the hidden debt. They wanted the city to stop the gangs. They wanted the factories to come back. But the city did not heal. The election only opened a new wound. A bitter fight started inside the government building. This fight was worse than the snowstorm of 1979. The fight would last for years. It would cost the city millions of dollars. It would prove that the leaders cared more about their own power than the people. You need to see how the leaders acted. The fight in City Hall explains exactly why Chicago could not stop its decline. The problems of debt, crime, and lost jobs did not get fixed. The leaders were too busy fighting each other. The people of Chicago suffered the most. Why did 29 city council members refuse to work with the new mayor? Harold Washington won the election with 51% of the vote, but the city council did not respect the vote. 29 aldermen grouped together. They promised to vote against every single idea the mayor proposed. They called themselves the Vertilac 29. They took their name from Edward Vertilac. He was the leader of the opposition group. The mayor had the support of the citizens. The citizens marched in the streets to support him. But inside the council room, the mayor had no power. The 29 aldermen held a strict majority of the 50 council seats. They controlled the money. They controlled the laws. The mayor sat in his office with no way to pass his plans. The voters chose a new direction. The city council forced the city to stand still. The 29 aldermen did not just vote no, they tried to destroy the city on purpose. In 1986, the city needed to pass a budget to pay the police and the firefighters. The 29 aldermen refused to approve the money. The city ran out of cash. The government stopped paying its bills. Garbage piled up in the alleys. The city faced a total shutdown. The aldermen were willing to let the streets burn just to make the mayor look bad. They held the city hostage for political power. The federal government sent Chicago a lot of money in the 1980s. The money was meant to fix the public housing buildings. The buildings were falling apart. The money was supposed to buy new windows, fix broken pipes, and repair the elevators. The leaders of the Chicago Housing Authority had nice offices. They drove city cars. They bought new furniture for themselves. But the people living in the projects had no heat in the winter. The water pipes froze and burst. The elevators in the tall concrete buildings were broken. Old women had to walk up 15 flights of stairs in the dark. The money for repairs stayed at the top. The suffering stayed at the bottom. In 1987, the federal government investigated the Housing Authority. The investigators found a terrible truth. The agency had lost millions of dollars. They could not produce receipts for the work. They could not prove where the money went. A federal judge named Nicholas Bua took control of the Housing Authority away from the city. It was the first time in American history that a federal judge seized a local housing agency. The city had failed its poorest citizens so badly that the courts had to take over. What happened to the factories that survived the 1970s? In 1981, the country entered a very bad recession. The Federal Reserve Bank raised interest rates to stop inflation. The interest rates went up to 20%. This meant banks charged huge fees to lend money. The banks in downtown Chicago made record profits from these high rates. A person with money in the bank got rich just by leaving it there. But the factories could not afford to borrow money. Factories need loans to buy supplies and pay workers before they sell their goods. The financial district got richer. The factory districts went bankrupt. The rules of money helped the wealthy. The rules of money killed the working class. In 1982 alone, Chicago lost 100,000 manufacturing jobs. 100,000 people lost their paychecks in 365 days. A company called Stewart Warner made car parts in Chicago for 80 years. They closed their factory in 1982 with no warning. They fired 1,500 workers on a Monday morning. The workers arrived at the factory gates. The doors were locked. A security guard handed them a piece of paper. The paper said the factory was closed forever. The workers stood in the parking lot. They had no jobs, no savings, and no place to go. The tension in the city reached a breaking point. The mayor fought the city council every day. The factory workers lost their homes. The people in the housing projects lived in cold, dark rooms. The gang leaders took over more streets because the city had no money to stop them. Everyone was fighting everyone else. The pressure on the city was too high. Something had to break. The breaking point came on November 25, 1987. Mayor Harold Washington went to a meeting at City Hall. He walked into his office. He put his head down on his desk. He suffered a massive heart attack. He died at the age of 65. The city stopped. The people cried in the streets. Thousands of people stood in the cold rain to say goodbye to him. But the politicians did not cry for long. The city council members started fighting over his empty chair before the funeral happened. Alderman Eugene Sawyer grabbed the mayor's office. The black community felt robbed. The political wars started all over again. In 1989, the city held another election. A man named Richard M. Daley ran for mayor. He was the son of the old mayor, Richard J. Daley. The voters were tired of the fighting. They wanted peace. Richard M. Daley won the election. The new mayor did not bring the factories back. He did not fix the neighborhoods. He made a choice. He decided to give up on the old Chicago. He made a deal with the wealthy downtown bankers. He gave them tax breaks. He let them build new office towers. He tore down the old public housing projects. He pushed the poor people out of the city limits. The decline of Chicago was now complete. The city did not disappear. It changed its shape. The rich people took the downtown area. The poor people were pushed to the edges. The middle-class factory workers were gone forever. The great industrial city was dead. A new corporate city took its place. The history books will tell you Chicago survived. The truth is, the old Chicago died in the 1980s, and the leaders let it happen.